Okay, so let's consider this problem that you guys have in your notes. A Mikado miniature camera company found that consumers were willing to pay P of X equals negative 0.2x squared plus $80. So this is your demand. This is what the consumer is willing to pay. And producers are willing to sell the cameras at P of X equals 0.1 x squared plus x plus 40. So there's your supply curve. Sketch a graph of both functions. So let's see. Let's do that. Need your calculator. So y equals negative 0.2 x squared plus 80, and then also 0.1 x squared plus x plus 40. All right, my window, I'm just going to do negative 10 to 10 for the time being for both the x and the y. Graph that. And I can't see anything. All right, so I'm going to go back to the suggestion that I made earlier. If you can't see your graph, then you really need to try to use those tips that I suggested. So the tip that I said is if you're looking for the y's, then you want to plug 0 into your two functions because they'll tell you where you hit your y-axis, right? Which is where x equals 0. So let's do P of 0 for this first one, negative 0.2 times 0 squared plus 80. So this means that you should be hitting at 80. And let's do the other one. 0.1 times 0 squared plus 0 plus 40, which means that you should also be hitting at 40. All right, so I'm going to go into my window, and as I mentioned in an earlier video, you need to go down, just keep scrolling past your x's to your y's, and your y should be at least as big as, you can see it right on your page, 80. So let's do, I don't know, 120 and graph. Okay, so now you see that I can see both of my curves, which is fantastic. Okay, so for these problems, consumer producer surplus, you want to find the point of intersection. I can barely see it. So if I'm looking for the x's, if you remember, I said go from negative 10 to 10. If that doesn't work, go from negative 10 to 100. If that doesn't work, go from negative 10 to 1000. You just keep going. So for my window, for the x's, notice I'm not scrolling all the way down. I'm just going to the x's. I'm going to go negative 10 to 100 and graph, see if I can find where those two functions cross each other. All right, so great. Okay, when you sketch your graph, make sure that it looks like this, right? Shouldn't be straight lines. You've got two parabolas. So there's one, there's the other. This is the one with the 80. So this is P of X equals negative 0.2 x squared plus 80. That's that one. And then this other one is P of X equals 0.1 x squared plus x plus 40. Notice it says right in the problem that I want you to sketch the graph of each function. You need to label them, okay? And then it says label the x and y axis. I'll get to that in a minute. It says label the y-intercepts. I just did. And then it says label each function. That's where that comes into play. All right. So it says that we have these cameras that we're trying to see how the market, how consumers and producers, the price behaves relative to the increase in sale and production of cameras, if you will. So we have cameras here, and then over on your y-axis, this is dollars price. Please pay attention to this because I am very particular per camera, right? So you're trying to find out what the sticker price is for each camera. All right, so again, this says that this one says that consumers are willing to pay as much as $80 to get their hands on the camera. This one says that the producers are willing to sell you the camera for as little as $40. They're not gonna tell you, right? Neither one's gonna tell you. So in order to find out the set price in the store, that's when equilibrium comes into play. Okay, so we're going to find that point of intersection by doing second calc, number 5, and enter, enter, enter. Okay, and I got 10, 60. So this point right here is 10, 60. So when you do this problem, you need to be careful because you want to draw a vertical line down to the x-axis and a horizontal line to your y-axis so that you can use the 10 and the 60. 10 is in the x, 10 goes here, and then 60 is in the y, 60 goes here. Your 60 is your set price. Okay, let me zoom in so that you can see that. Okay, so if you get into the store, you're gonna see these cameras selling for $60. Now to be clear, the consumer is willing to pay as much as $80, so there's a $20 gap here, right? And as long as the consumer is willing to pay more money than they have to, the consumers perceive a benefit. Look over here. The producer is willing to sell this to you, the cameras, for as little as $40, but as long as they're willing to get 60, which is more than the 40 and the numbers they're after, the producer thinks that they're getting a benefit. All right, so let me zoom out so that I can answer some of these questions. It says, what's the equilibrium price? Here's your prices over here, $60. Make sure your units are on point. And what's the equilibrium quantity? And this is 10 cameras. All right, so that's good. So the next question says, shade the region that represents the consumer surplus. So let's see, consumer surplus. Consumer is willing to pay as much as 80. They do pay 60. So this represents the consumer surplus. It's the gap between what the consumer is willing to pay and what they have to pay. So it's in your best interest to write down that antiderivative just so that you can keep track of what's going on. So that shaded region is this antiderivative. Let's do top minus bottom, just like we did with the other part of your homework. Okay, so if I take my pen and I drop it right here, you can see that your top is this demand function. So negative 0.2 x squared plus 80. And your bottom is the $60 price. 60, the whole thing, dx. And how far does this go? It goes from x equals 0 to x equals 10. Okay? Now you have to be really careful because a lot of students are going to think that your supply curve is the bottom. No, it's not. Notice, as long as the consumer pays more than they have to, so your consumer surplus only has to deal with whatever demand is and the set prices. Okay? So let me go down here because I also want to find the producer surplus. I'm going to fold this up so that you can have it right next to your graph. Okay, now your producer surplus comes into play when the set price is higher than they were secretly willing to take. So let me show you what the producer surplus, this blue region is the producer surplus. It has nothing to do with the consumer surplus. So then your producer surplus is equal to, again, top minus bottom. In this case, look what's on top, $60, right? It's your set price. So 60 minus your supply curve, 0.1 x squared plus x plus 40, the whole thing, dx. And notice this region also runs from 0 to 10. 0 to 10. Okay? Now these aren't hard to find in your calculator, right? This is basically just the homework that I asked you to do recently. Right? So if I wanted to do this first calculation, this one here, that is your consumer surplus. This was your consumer surplus. Not hard to do. I'm going to smash them together and make a hybrid. So I get negative 0.2 x squared plus 80. And I'm going to subtract off the 60. I will show you what I'm plugging in my calculator. Okay, I tend to put parentheses around both functions so that I won't forget to distribute if necessary. So I'm going to graph that. And move second calc, number 7. oops, I need to have it in graph mode. So second calc, number 7, lower limit is 0, upper limit is 10. And there you go. This equals 133.33. Like that. Okay, hopefully you can see that on my curve. Calculator rather. Here, if I want to do the producer surplus, I'm going to smash them together. So parentheses 60. It definitely is in your parentheses, in your best interest to put parentheses around 0.1, the second one, because you don't want to have to do the work by hand. Plus 40. Okay. Graph that. Second calc, number 7. Ugh. Graph. Second calc, number 7. Lower limit 0, upper limit 10. And for that one, I got $116.67, right? Okay. So let me go to one more problem and then I will call it quits from there. I'm going to start you guys off on this one, although I may not see it to its completion. This one says use the fundamental theorem of calculus, right? So this says you do this work by hand. So here we go. Consumer surplus, which equals the integral from 0 to 10 of negative 0.2x squared plus 20 dx. Notice I combine those two together. This equals negative 0.2x to the third over 3 plus 20x to the first over 1 plus c, placeholder 0 to 10, right? So notice the first thing I did was take the antiderivative, and then the next thing I'm going to do is plug the 10 in and then subtract off what happens at 0. Negative 0.2 times 10 cubed over 3 plus 20 times 10 plus c. Subtract off what happens at 0. I'm going to let you guys finish this. Plus 20 times 0 over 1 plus c. And that should be the exact same answer as that.